I was 9 years old when my family went to the Great Smoky Mountains, and looking back, it's hard to think of those mountains without remembering what happened. I still feel it like a cold shadow that follows me in the back of my mind whenever I find myself in a quiet, wooded place. The day started out like we set up camp in a small, secluded spot near the edge of the park, far enough from the busy parts of the trail to feel like we were alone in the wilderness. My parents were busy setting up the tent, arguing over the best place to pitch it, while my brother was off somewhere, probably trying to get into trouble. I was a little too old to be playing with dolls, but still too young to really understand the adult world of responsibility and planning. So, I did what any child would do when left to their own devices in such a beautiful place. I wandered. I found a small creek not far from the camp, its waters clear and bubbling over smooth rocks. I tossed little stones into it, watching them make ripples and disappear, just like my thoughts. It was peaceful, and I liked it. I was so absorbed in my own world, so comfortable in the stillness of nature, that I didn't even hear them at first. A man and woman appeared as if they'd stepped right out of the trees, their presence strange and out of place. They didn't look like hikers, or at least not like the kind of hikers I had seen on the trails. Their clothes were too clean, too neat. They moved like they had been there for a long time. The man, tall, with a wide smile, looked friendly enough, but his eyes, they were cold. There was something about the way he looked at me that made my stomach tighten. And then there was the woman, her hair pulled back into a neat scarf, her smile just as warm. "Hey there, kiddo," the man called out. His voice was like he was trying to make me feel comfortable, trying to put me into a false sense of safety. "What are you doing out here all by yourself?" I froze, not because I was afraid of what he said, but because it felt too much like he was watching me. It wasn't a question that someone normally asks a kid out in the woods. It felt rehearsed, planned. And the way he said it made me feel like I wasn't supposed to be alone, like I'd broken some invisible rule. The woman stepped closer, her hands gentle and soft as she reached into the bag she was carrying. She pulled out a brightly wrapped candy and held it out to me. "We have plenty of these," she said, her voice sweet, but there was an underlying urgency. "Would you like one?" My mind went into overdrive. I could hear my mother's voice echoing in my head, "Never take anything from strangers." I had been taught that since I could remember. But these people, something about them made it hard to think straight. Their smiles were so wide, too wide, and their eyes were locked onto me like I was the only thing in the world. I looked at the candy, then back at them, my feet rooted to the ground as I tried to read their faces. The woman's hand remained outstretched, her fingers delicate, but I felt a sudden chill creep down my spine. Something was wrong. I didn't know why, but the little hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Maybe it was the way the man's smile didn't quite reach his eyes, or maybe it was the way they kept looking at each other, like they were communicating without words. Whatever it was, I knew it wasn't safe. I glanced around, hoping to spot my parents. They were still near the camp, but too far to notice what was happening. My heart began to race. I knew I should call out to them, but the thought of taking my eyes off these strangers was terrifying. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. I couldn't make a sound. The man leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "You know, the trail down there," he pointed toward the thick woods behind them. "There's something special down there. A place no one else knows about. Just for you. You'd like it. We could show you. It's not too far. Your parents won't mind, right?" I could feel the knot in my stomach tighten. Something was pulling me toward them, urging me to follow, but something else, something primal, was screaming in my mind to run. I could feel it, deep in my gut. This wasn't right. The woman smiled again, her lips curling into that too perfect smile. "It'll be fun," she coaxed, but there was no warmth in her voice. It was all wrong. The way they were acting, the way they spoke it, was all so smooth, so perfect, but there was something dark just underneath it. Like they were trying to lure me, and I wasn't sure why or how. My instincts kicked in. I didn't understand it all, but I knew I had to get away from them. Fast. Without thinking, I turned on my heel and bolted. I could hear them calling after me, but it didn't matter. I didn't stop running until I was back at the camp, breathless and shaking. I found my parents, my brother too, standing by the fire, blissfully unaware of what had just happened. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't even explain the fear that was clenching my stomach. I stayed close to them after that, not letting myself wander too far. It wasn't until we were back home, unpacking our bags and talking about what a lovely trip it had been, that I finally told my mom and dad what happened. I could see the doubt in my parents' eyes. I couldn't explain it fully, but the fear was still with me, even as I grew older. It was a family trip, a few days in the Smoky Mountains, a break from the grind, but it turned into something else. Something I'll never forget. That day, my husband, the kids, and I, all excited, ready to camp, get away from everything, and pretend we were back to nature, like the days before, social media and constant work pressure. So we set up camp in an unpermitted area. We weren't about to pay some outrageous camping fees when we could just find a quiet spot on our own. Nobody would be around. No rangers, no tourists, no distractions. Just us, the mountains, and the silence. Well, we got the silence all right, but not the peace. We barely set up the tents, and already something felt off. There was this weird tension in the air, like someone was watching us. But I brushed it off, thinking I was just being paranoid. You know how it is when you're out in the woods. The sounds of the forest can mess with your head, especially at dusk when the sun's going down and everything gets a little strange. That's when we just settled in. I saw her. She didn't just appear, she was there, out of nowhere. A woman in her 30s, disheveled, stumbling across the clearing like she was lost. Her face was smeared with dirt and something else, something I couldn't place. She wore these torn clothes. She wasn't even looking at us directly. My husband didn't say anything at first, just muttered under his breath about keeping an eye on her. But I could see his hand hovered near the pocket, where he kept the knife. I wasn't much better off, to be honest. There was something about her that set me on edge, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions. Maybe she was gotten lost. I tried to ignore it, focus on the kids, and set up the fire. But then it got worse. As the night crept on, she came closer. It was like she had no sense of boundaries, no understanding of personal space. First, she circled the campsite, slow, keeping her distance but getting too close for comfort. My husband called out to her, asked if she needed help, but she didn't respond. She just kept pacing, her eyes darting around like she was looking for something. Maybe she had broken inside her. At some point, she got real brave, or maybe just desperate. She came up to us, right to the edge of the firelight. She stood there for a long moment, just staring at us, silent. The whole family stopped what they were doing, waiting, trying to figure out what to do next. "Hey, you okay?" I asked her. She didn't answer me. Instead, she just squatted down right next to our campsite. And then it happened. She pissed herself. Right there, right in front of the kids and my husband. I could feel my blood boil. I shot up from my seat and started shouting at her, demanding she leave. But she didn't move. My husband was furious, and I was too. But we didn't want to make a scene. We didn't want to provoke her, especially with the kids around. So, we tried to push it out of our minds, told ourselves that maybe it was just a moment of craziness. The next day, we woke up to the same strange feeling. But this time, she didn't stay away. She showed up again, uninvited, of course. "Get out from here or I will call the police," my husband shouted this time. She didn't answer him directly. Instead, she asked for money. Not in a polite, but in a demanding, threatening tone that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. And then she did something that made everything in me freeze. She grabbed our dog, our sweet dog. She held him by the collar, her hands shaking, and told us if we didn't give her money, she'd hurt him. I wanted to charge at her, but I was frozen. My husband, trying to keep things from getting out of hand, reluctantly pulled out his wallet and handed her cash. It wasn't much, just a few bills, but it was enough to get her off our backs. I wish I could say that settled things. But it didn't. Not by a long shot. The woman didn't leave. Instead, she kept circling, kept asking for more. Her behavior got stranger, more erratic. I knew right then that we weren't safe. She was unpredictable. We had no idea what she might do next. I turned to my husband. We're leaving. Now. He knew too. The kids were already packed up. We folded tents, packed sleeping bags, and shoved everything back into the car. We didn't even stop to look back. We left that place behind, and I swore to myself, to my family, that we would never camp somewhere we didn't know. I had been looking forward to New Year's Eve. My friends and I had planned a small get-together at Tennessee State Park, a night of fun, a way to ring in the new year with laughter, good drinks, and even better company. We arrived at the park that afternoon, set up our little camp by the lake, and the atmosphere was everything we'd hoped for. The forest surrounding us was thick with the smell of pine and fresh earth. The party started with just a few of us, but as night crept in, more people trickled and friends of friends, mostly people I didn't know all that well. The group expanded, the bonfire crackled louder, and the air grew thicker with smoke and the scent of alcohol. I didn't mind. At first, it was all laughter and chatter. We passed around bottles, sipped on drinks, and exchanged stories. I didn't keep track of how much I had to drink. Not that night. The first few drinks were harmless enough. The buzz was light, nothing to make me second-guess anything. But then something changed. A shift I couldn't pinpoint at first. My vision began to blur. The world felt distant, like I was floating above it, not really present. My head grew heavy, and a dizzying sensation crept up my spine. I was just about to ask someone if they felt the same way when I heard a voice, low and unsettling. I couldn't move. The ground beneath me felt soft, like it was shifting with every step. I tried to focus, tried to remember what I was doing, where I was, but nothing came. Just a voice. And then the whispers. One of the guys, a friend of a friend, was saying things. Horrible things. Things I shouldn't have been hearing, not in my state. The words blurred with the dizziness, but I could still hear enough. He was talking about me. Talking about what he was going to do. He was threatening me. Rape. That word echoed in my mind like a slow drumbeat. Over and over again, I heard it. I tried to move, tried to scream, but nothing came. I was frozen, paralyzed, and I could feel my heart racing in my chest, but I couldn't do anything. I was helpless, trapped in my own body. I could hear laughter in the background, unaware, oblivious. No one knew what was happening to me. No one could hear what I was hearing. In a moment of clarity, in the fog of terror, I managed to grab my phone. My fingers fumbled over the screen, barely able to focus, but I somehow called my best friend, Rachel. I managed to croak out a few words, telling her to come. I didn't know if she would make it in time, but I couldn't stay there, couldn't let him get any closer. The darkness was closing in. I don't remember much after that. The world spun around me, and my body lost the fight to stay awake. My eyes fluttered closed, and the last thing I remember was the sound of Rachel's voice shouting in the distance, the panicked edge in her tone as she ran toward me. When I woke up, I was in a small cabin, my head pounding like a drum. I tried to sit up, but everything around me was spinning. Rachel was sitting by the window, her face pale, her eyes red from crying. Her presence was a comfort, but the terror still clung to me like a shadow I couldn't shake off. "What happened?" I croaked, my throat dry, cracked. "No, don't try to talk yet. Just rest," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You've been out for hours." I tried to piece together what had happened, but everything was a blur. Bits and pieces floated to the surface of my mind, whispers, threats, the feeling of being trapped. My stomach churned as the memory of that man's voice came rushing back. Rachel must have seen the panic in my eyes because she took my hand, holding it tightly. "We got you out of there. You're safe now." Safe. I had always trusted people, my friends, my circle. How had we ended up here? Over the next few hours, I slowly regained my bearings. The physical effects of whatever had been in my drink were fading. After I'd made the call, she and another friend, Matt, had rushed to the park. They found me just as I was losing consciousness. They managed to get me to the cabin before anything worse could happen, but the entire time, they had no idea who the person was who had done this to me. The group was in chaos when they realized what had happened, but Rachel, Matt, and a couple of others stuck by me, refusing to leave until I was safe. I'll never be able to express how much that meant to me. We never figured out who had done it. The group had their suspicions, but no one could say for sure. Maybe it didn't matter. The night that was supposed to be full of joy, of celebration, turned into something far darker than I could have imagined. I'm not talking about the bullshit ghost stories or urban legends people love to spout off when they're drunk around a campfire. I'm talking about real, flesh and blood danger that'll make you think. You'd think I'd know better after what happened that night. But you know how it is when you're a teenager, right? That night, me and my twin sister, Ellie, and our two friends were all about pushing boundaries. And what better place than the Smoky Mountains? Secluded, dark, and nothing for miles except trees. I don't know why we thought it was a good idea to hike up there so damn late. Probably because we were bored. We'd been cooped up at Lena's house for too long, and that restless feeling was kicking in, like it always did when we got a little too comfortable. Ellie and I had always been the wild ones, and Lena and Rachel, well, they were too shy, too innocent, really. They looked to us to show them the way. When I suggested we go check out that lake, I knew about it from some older kids in school. They said it was a place where the stars shone brighter, where it was peaceful, away from everything. We hiked up the trail and made our way off the beaten path into the thick of the woods. It wasn't long before the atmosphere changed. We walked for miles, deeper into the woods, and the sounds of the forest began to shift. Something wasn't right, but we didn't say anything. None of us did. We just kept walking. Then suddenly we heard some noises coming from far away deep in the woods. But it seems like it was nothing more than a faint rustle, barely perceptible. I shrugged it off, telling myself it was just the wind or some animal moving through the underbrush. But then it grew louder. The footsteps. Crunching leaves, twigs snapping, someone or something was following us. I turned to Ellie, and her face was pale, her lips pressed into a tight line. We kept walking faster. I don't know how long we walked, but by the time we finally reached the lake, we decided to sit by the water and talk about whatever popped into our heads, laughing about nothing. That's when we heard it. A crack. It was them. A group of men. They emerged from the shadows like ghosts, their faces covered with masks. My heart slammed in my chest. One of them was carrying a baseball bat, and it was only then that I realized what was happening. I grabbed Ellie's arm, pulling her up, and Lena and Rachel scrambled to their feet. We didn't know what to do. We didn't know if they were going to talk to us, if they were going to make demands, or if they were just going to beat the shit out of us for no reason. I was so damn scared I couldn't even breathe. I can't remember who made the first move, and that's when the chase started. They just moved toward us with purpose, those bats in their hands swinging like they knew exactly what they were doing. We bolted, tearing through the woods, stumbling over roots. I remember my lungs burning as I pushed myself harder than I had ever pushed myself before. I couldn't tell how far we'd run, how much time had passed. All I knew was that we had to keep moving. We had to get out. Somehow, we made it back to the trail. We just kept going, our legs shaking, our breath ragged. It felt like hours before we finally made it to the car. We drove home in a daze. The next few days were a blur. Weeks later, the news report. I'll never forget it. A man was found dead that same lake. Beaten to death, they said. They didn't know who did it, but they said it had happened the same week we were there. And that's when it hit me. We weren't just unlucky. We weren't just in the wrong place at the wrong time. We were almost the next victims. That thought hasn't left me since.